This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. You would think the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, would stand up for American values above all else. You know, life, liberty. Well, instead, President Trump is siding tonight with a repressive regime that allegedly sent a hit squad to kidnap, to torture, and to murder a U.S. resident. The president says, and here's a quote, "Here we go again with, you know, you're guilty until proven innocent. I don't like that. We just went through that with Justice Kavanaugh, and he was innocent all the way as far as I'm concerned." Quite a statement. Innocent all the way. You know who else doesn't believe in the innocent until proven guilty thing? A tenet of our American judicial system and our American values. You know who doesn't believe in that? The Saudis. And there are more and more details coming out tonight about what is believed to be the horrific murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Sources telling CNN a high-ranking Saudi intel officer, one close to the inner circle of the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, oversaw that mission. The New York Times is reporting that one of the suspects was a frequent companion of the Crown Prince. 3 others linked to his security detail. And of course, there's the forensic doctor reportedly carrying a bone saw. A Turkish official is saying that Khashoggi's body was dismembered after he was killed. One source is telling CNN that Khashoggi may have been injected with some kind of tranquilizer before he died in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. It's horrific. And Turkey has provided CNN with passport scans of 7 men that they suspect were part of the alleged Saudi hit squad. The scans made on the day that Khashoggi disappeared. And then there's this. The inside of the consulate was cleaned and freshly painted before investigators got inside last night. Multiple suspects with ties to the Crown Prince, a doctor with a bone saw, the consulate freshly painted. These are not innocent details. We are still waiting for Saudi Arabia to put out that promised report that sources have said would admit Khashoggi's death, though they're apparently still hoping to sell that story, the story of a botched interrogation. Who could possibly buy that?
It sounded to me like maybe these could have been rogue killers. Who knows?
Oh. What American diplomat would sit laughing next to a dictator accused of a brutal murder that's the focus of the entire global community? Well, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, met with the Crown Prince today, smiling and thanking him for his transparent investigation, while the president tweets, totally denying that the Crown Prince had any knowledge of what took place. And that is not all of what the president was tweeting today. It is no coincidence that he made sure to tweet that he has no financial interest in Saudi Arabia. But the fact is, he made a lot of money off of them. He told us about it himself. Don't believe me? Roll the tape.
Saudi Arabia, and I get along great with all of them. They buy apartments from me, they spend $40 million, $50 million. Am I supposed to dislike them? I like them very much.
But he never said that. Among the things the Saudis have bought from Donald Trump, the 45th floor of Trump World Tower, not to mention hundreds of thousands of dollars spent at Trump hotels in Washington and New York and Chicago. Compare the president's kid glove treatment of a repressive regime with what really set him off today. This is what really set him off. That's right, Stormy Daniels. Quote, "Now I can go after Horseface and her third-rate lawyer." Yep, that's what the President of the United States was really worked up about today. He actually tweeted that. Your president, our president, tweeted that. He called a woman a horseface. In spite of everything that's going on, especially with this missing journalist, people still recovering down in the Panhandle, that's what he's concerned about. Not holding Saudi Arabia to account right now. Insulting the porn star who says her own admission, she had sex with Donald Trump. But this president really takes it personally when a woman crosses him. And when he fights back, he fights dirty. There's Elizabeth Warren.
Pocahontas, That's this Elizabeth Warren. Massachusetts is represented by Pocahontas, right? Pocahontas. Pocahontas? Pocahontas. Pocahontas. What an insult to Pocahontas. We have a representative in Congress who they say was here a long time ago. They call her Pocahontas.
There's his mocking of Kavanaugh accuser Christine Blasey Ford.
How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. What neighborhood was it in? I don't know. Where's the house? I don't know. Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know. But I had one beer. That's the only thing I remember.
There's his obsession with Hillary Clinton, even though she lost the election to him nearly 2 years ago.
That's why she lost. She doesn't get it. I beat Hillary Clinton easily. Many billions of dollars more than they would have had if you had crooked Hillary Clinton. Crooked Hillary. Crooked Hillary. Crooked Hillary Clinton.
His insults aimed at Maxine Waters.
Maxine Waters, a very low IQ individual. She is a low IQ individual, Maxine Waters. I said it the other day. I mean, honestly, she's somewhere in the mid-60s. Maxine Waters. Very low IQ. Low IQ.
I can go on and on all night. We have a little bit more time, so let's go on a little more. He mocked Heidi Cruz, Carly Fiorina, both of them for their looks. He falsely claimed that Mika Brzezinski over at MSNBC was bleeding from a facelift. He called his ex-aide Omarosa a dog. And then Trump doubled down and told me this.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals.
And of course, there's what he said about Access Hollywood, to Access Hollywood, about women.
I better use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just, I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything.
So, lots of tough, really terrible, disgusting talk aimed at women. But we're still waiting for this president to get tough on Saudi Arabia, to demand the truth about what happened to Jamal Khashoggi, to stand up for American values, to be the leader of the free world. Still waiting. The world is waiting. Lots to talk about now. Phil Mudd, Frank Bruni, Michael DAntonio, right after this break. President Trump siding with the Saudis, who are still denying any role in the disappearance and suspected murder of Jamal Khashoggi. But is the president just giving them cover? I want to talk about this now with Philip Mudd. He's a former CIA counterterrorism official who briefly worked for the Saudi government in 2010 and 2011. Also here, Frank Bruni of the New York Times, and Michael DAntonio is the author of The Truth About Trump. Good evening to everyone. So, Frank, here's the quote from the president tonight. It says, "Here we go again with, you know, you're guilty until proven innocent." And then he's comparing it to the Kavanaugh hearings. How can he be this dismissive of potential murder and all of its glory details?
I don't know. I mean, it's dumbfounding and it's utterly mortifying as an American. He seems intensely invested in, as you said, covering for the Saudis. It was remarkable yesterday when we heard the president say to the press, I don't know, maybe it was rogue killers or something, and then we learned that that is a theory, that's a kind of defense the Saudis are developing and thinking about trotting out. And here they have the president of the United States sort of floating their PR trial balloon for them for whatever reasons, and I think they're probably about saving face, since Saudi Arabia was the first place he went to a big foreign trip and they feted him and all that. He seems bound and determined to try to help the Saudis convince the world that something out of their control happened to this journalist who walked into their consulate, never walked out.
That's what I was going to ask you, because first it was the rogue killer theory, and then his defense of the Crown Prince to the Associated Press. Is he not only believing the cover story, is he helping to construct it?
I think he's helping to construct it. I can't believe that he believes it, but I don't think he cares. I think he sees it.
Right.
He sees it as he sees it as in his interest and in our country's interest.
Politically expedient.
To somehow help the Saudis wriggle out of this.
Yeah.
And so he's happy to do that because the morals of this bizarrely seem not to concern him one whit.
What were you saying, Michael?
He is constructing a story, and this is the thing that he's done all of his life. He says that he's a great builder, but really what he is a big builder of stories. He's always told stories about himself, stories about the United States, stories about the world at large. Everybody's laughing at us.
And people fall for it.
Oh, well, it's a narrative, and he is spellbinding, I think, to a lot of folks.
Yeah.
But the authoritarians and autocrats are his folks. You know, this is someone who fell in love with Kim. It's someone who laughed when Duterte said, well, reporters are eligible for assassination. He likes this kind of leader. And did you see him on Monday after he came out into the lawn and said, I just spoke with the king? Those are words he's
Denies it
wanted to
strongly,
say
yeah.
his whole life.
Yeah. I got to ask you, and I hate, Phil, to talk about this because there are people who knew him, colleagues, loved ones, and it's horrific to hear these sort of details. But Turkish officials are saying that Khashoggi was cut into pieces. And CNN is reporting that a high-ranking official with the Saudi intel agency oversaw all of this, and this officer is close to the Crown Prince's inner circle, and yet the president accepts Saudi's denials at face value. Why?
Don't ask me. I mean, if you look at where the president's coming from, as we were talking about just a moment ago, he likes to be portrayed as someone who can handle heavy hitters around the world. That's Putin, that's Kim Jong-un, that's Mohammed bin Salman. He wants to be seen as someone who can handle these guys. I mean, the bottom line, though, let me cut to the chase and get to some facts. There are questions the president could ask. Let me get real tactical. What aircraft, and the Turks should know this, what aircraft flew into Turkey? We should have the tail numbers of those. Who owns those aircraft? What's the background of the individuals who flew into Turkey? Have they flown into other places? Do we know they work for the Ministry of Interior? Do we have independent U.S. intelligence about who ordered this operation? Have we talked to the Turks about whether they have audio from, as they've said they have, audio from the operation? And have they said that they saw cameras in the Saudi consulate when they looked at it over the past 48 hours? What did they get from those Saudi cameras? Let me cut to the chase. The president has to get off his fat ass and ask a couple of basic investigative questions about what do we know and whether that information suggests that the Saudis were culpable or not. This is not that hard, Don. It's not that hard.
Wow. Harsh words there, Phil.
I mean, if you ask an FBI investigator, you could be a 24-year-old FBI investigator and figure this out. You have some forensics here, like whether or not information from within the Saudi embassy was destroyed. Do we have that or not? Again, simply, the Turks had to register aircraft coming into the country from Saudi Arabia. Did they register those aircraft when they landed? Did those aircraft have tail numbers? And who owns those aircraft? Yeah. How hard is that, Don? That takes about 30 seconds on your show.
Yeah. Again, those were tough words. Phil, I'm sure, stands by those words. But I got to ask you, you talked about evidence, right, Phil? The Turks also say that there was fresh coat of paint. It was applied, quote, everywhere inside the Saudi consulate before Turkish investigators gained access. Could the mission or the cover-up happen without the knowledge of people at the top?
I don't think so. I mean, I lived in Saudi Arabia. Look at some of the facts in this case. You're talking about a well-known oppositionist in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis are worried about oppositionists. They saw what happened to other dictator leaders in the Middle East after the Arab Spring. They send roughly 15 people on multiple aircraft who presumably have cleared access to a Saudi diplomatic facility, that is the consulate in Istanbul. You think some guy sat around on Friday night and said, let's have a frat party in Istanbul? Or Ankara in Turkey? No, that's not credible. A bunch of people traveled with the authorization of Saudi leadership to interrogate a well-known oppositionist. There's no way that happened with a bunch of guys sitting around saying, let's conduct a rogue operation. I don't buy it.
Michael, you mentioned earlier that we said that he spoke with the king. You said he's always wanted to say those words, right? But then he tweeted that he spoke with the Crown Prince, and he said answers were forthcoming. But how can we believe what we hear from the president if he's just taking the Saudis at their word?
We can't believe him most of the time. This is a person who's lied 5,000 times now. He's really detached from reality. And how depraved is he that he can hear about a man being brought into this facility and leaving in pieces and not be completely outraged? And if you think American intelligence officials don't know which aircraft entered that airspace and exactly what happened, I'd be surprised that they wouldn't. This is American intelligence, the best intelligence in the world. The president doesn't have to ask the kingdom. He can ask his own folks, and they know.
Mm-hmm.
Don, can I follow up on something Phil said? Phil said the president wants to show that he can handle strong men. What's so remarkable about this is he's not handling these strong men, he's coddling them. He's curtsying to them, he's making excuses for them, and in fact, in his desire, his palpable, evident desire to please them, he looks weaker than ever. He doesn't look like he's at their level, he looks like he's doing their bidding.
But he's thrilled by putting over a story that he thinks people might accept. It's more thrilling to him to fool the world or to imagine that he's fooled the world than to be right.
He doesn't really care about reality and truth then. That's what...
He cares about what benefits Donald Trump.
Okay. It means he doesn't care about human rights.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so follow the money. And I'm talking about to the Trump organization, to Donald Trump, not sure as president, but follow the money to the Saudis. We'll discuss that next. So President Trump may be trying to take the heat off of Saudi Arabia by turning his attention to Stormy Daniels, insulting her in one of his tweets today, calling her horseface after her defamation suit against him was dismissed. I can't believe I just read that about the President of the United States tweeting that. Phil Mudd is back, Frank Bruni, and Michael DAntonio as well. So the world wants to get to the bottom of what happened to the journalist. The president, though, is lobbing insults against Stormy Daniels on Twitter. I mean, if he's trying to distract, it's not working. But is that what this is, an effort to change the news cycle, Michael?
It could be, but this is also...
Who he is.
It's deviance. This is a person who's... A deviant person breaks the norms, but we also have him in the White House, and presidents are supposed to set the norms and enforce the norms. So what's happening is what Daniel Patrick Moynihan called defining deviance down. He's decided that anything I say is okay. The public is accepting it to a degree. I think we've all learned to kind of tune him out. So he's permitted to do these horrible things, say whatever he feels like saying, insult people, and we say, well, maybe it's a distraction or it's just the president being the president. But we're using that word, the president.
I don't think it's a distraction at all. I think it's a perfect illustration of his values, right? He cares less about what happened in that consulate than he does about a porn star insulting the dimensions of his phallus and getting in a Twitter war with her. And it's hard to believe that in the United States of America, we have a president who is spending his time and his emotional energy in this kind of war of words with a porn star over his endowment as a man. Like, how did we get here in the United States of America?
She was okay when he wanted to have sex with her.
And we're talking about this at a moment when we should be talking about this profound human rights violation, right? This human rights violation by a regime that the president and his son-in-law have been kissing up to like nobody's business, but instead, he's worried about what someone's saying about his genitalia.
Well, I just got to quickly before I get back to Phil, and this is a conservative pollster, Frank Luntz, has tweeted, said President Trump has taken a harder stance on Canadian milk than on Saudi murder.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. He's really tough on the Canadian dairy farmers. Big deal.
He's tougher on Stormy Daniels.
Absolutely. And this is in the same moment when the world is trying to find out what happened to this journalist who worked for an American news operation and was an American resident. And he doesn't care.
Yeah. So, Phil, this morning the president tweeted that he had no financial interest in Saudi Arabia, but this is not true. And I played it earlier. The president has bragged about all of the money he's made, millions and millions from the Saudis. Phil?
I mean, that's correct. But I think that the significant question here, when we have a president who's declined to separate himself from his business interests, is the brilliance of the construction of the American Republic when you say we have checks and balances. So what does that mean, Don? The Congress is going to step in and say, the president has some simple options. He could call the Europeans and say, how do we collectively, so we don't have to operate in isolation and alienate the Saudis, how do we collectively apply things like sanctions against the Saudis? And we go to the Saudis and say, look, we have no option. The French, the Brits and others say we have to do something. Instead, the Congress is going to have to step in because of this system of checks and balances and say, if the president wants to focus on Stormy Daniels and denying that he paid $130,000 to have sex with a woman who he thinks is unattractive, if he wants to focus on that, the Congress is going to step in and say, we're going to be more severe than you ever would have been, including potentially blocking arms sales. This is when the Congress and people like Marco Rubio are critical, Don. They're just critical.
Mm-hmm. Frank, there was this Washington Post story. It was just last week where they had obtained a letter, and it was from earlier this year by the GM of Trump Hotel in New York. He's crediting the Saudis for boosting the first quarter. The major reason, he said, is, quote, a last-minute visit to New York by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
Right.
What's your take here?
Well, I mean, I think you're asking the right question. Where is money in this? Where is Trump's personal fortune and his concern about it in all of this? But he's also he's shown a lot of his cards here. I mean, he sat down with 60 Minutes. He reiterated something he had said a few days prior. And when asked about what had happened in the Saudi consulate, he said, you know, they're spending a lot of money on weapons. They're paying us for weapons, and I don't want to do anything to queer that. He has made it very clear that when money comes up against human rights, for Donald Trump, always money will win out, whether that's his own fortune or whether that's the country's economic fortune.
And there are Trump supporters wonder, why do you keep harping on the taxes? Isn't that what the tax returns will show, who you're doing business with, to whom you're indebted? And also, this is why we have the emoluments clause.
We won't know about the purity of his decisions, and we won't know which decisions are made free of a conflict of interest unless we know where his money's coming from and whom he owes. And that's in the tax return.
Phil, are you concerned at all that the president's financial ties are part of why the president appears to accept the denial so far from the Crown Prince?
Boy, it's the first time on your show I'm going to be naive. I cannot believe that the president of the United States is putting personal interest above national interest in a case where a human being is murdered. Let me give you one fact, though, that I think is the most fascinating piece of all this. If we're concerned that the president, and I would be as well, that the president has inappropriate financial contacts with people like the Saudis and the Russians, this is why, going back months, if I were the president, I would be deeply worried about the raids, the FBI raids on Michael Cohen's office, his hotel, and his home. It's not because I'm worried about pay for play in the campaign with the Russians. If I were the president, I'd be worried that the Mueller team is acquiring information that shows that the president had inappropriate real estate transactions with people like the Russians and the Saudis. I think we're going to find this not through this process with the Saudis today, but with the legal process led by Special Counsel Mueller into the money that people like Jared Cohen and the president spent with the Russians and the Saudis in the past. We're going to find something dirty, Don.
You meant Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner. Okay, that's got to be the
Jared
last word.
Kushner, I'm sorry. That's correct.
That's okay. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.